Hello, this is Barbara Blodgett. In this course we're learning about strategic planning and viewing the process of strategic planning as one of hosting a conversation. So I thought I would start with a story about a conversation. Several years ago, a church that I was a new member of was having a planning meeting about new directions they might take in worship. I had the wrong time for the meeting and I showed up half an hour late. Well, that turned out to be a blessing in disguise. When I came in, the group was in the midst of a full-blown complaint session about how noisy the children were in worship. Their complaining had even gotten them to a point where they were brainstorming ways to think about getting the children out of worship sooner. Well, having interrupted their conversation by my arrival, I seized the opportunity, and using both excuses of being late and being new to the church, I asked them, "Well, you've probably already talked about this, but tell me what it is that you value about worship at St. Paul's. What is it that makes worship at St. Paul's special and that you feel you're missing out on when the children are with us? Is it a sense of order and predictability? That's what some people want more of." And they shook their heads, "No, that really wasn't quite it." Well, at my invitation, they started thinking about what it was they loved about worship at St. Paul's, and immediately someone mentioned prayer circle. Everybody loves prayer circle at St. Paul's. I once ran into a guy in the grocery store who had attended St. Paul's many years ago, and the thing he mentioned was how I loved that prayer circle. Basically what it is that the way the prayers of the people are done is that everybody gets up out of their seats and forms a circle holding hands, and they offer their prayers to one another. It's a time that is very reverential and quiet. You never know quite how long it's going to last or what people will say, but it's always a time full of honesty and a deep sense of vulnerability, mutual vulnerability. The people at St. Paul's are not afraid or ashamed to offer prayers for themselves. Fairly regularly someone will offer a prayer that their sobriety will last. There's one guy who regularly asks a prayer that his anger will be managed and he'll never again take it out on his wife. And of course people also offer up prayers for those not present, connecting the community gathered that morning to a wider circle. And so in the meeting I said, well, maybe what you're wanting is more a sense of quiet and reverence, a time that's meaningful. And they vigorously nodded their head yes. And that got them thinking of people in the congregation who knew something about practices of silence and contemplative prayer and rituals like candlelighting, who might be able to lead them in a quiet time. Well, to make a long story short, that's how two things happened as a result of my having been late for the meeting. First, I was named chair of a newly formed worship committee, and second, there was instituted a new practice at St. Paul's called Quiet Moment, which continues to this day. Quiet Moment happens after the children's departure from worship and before the sermon. And I just have to chuckle when on the occasional times that children are present throughout the worship service, the adults say, maybe it's not such a bad thing to have them here. After all, they can learn how to do Quiet Moment. I tell this story because it contains three themes that we will cover in this course. First, good planning connects the present to the past and identifies what is authentic to a congregation, what it has been known for, and what it has done well. Second, good planning is appreciative rather than negative. It focuses on interpreting values rather than fixing problems. And third, good planning builds on assets already present within the community. What I'm going to do is correlate these three themes with the three phases of the strategic planning process, one for each week of the course. Rendell and Mann, who have written the textbook for our course, as you will recall, divide the full planning process into three phases that they call getting ready, collecting data, and shaping the future. I refer you to their map on page 36. And by way of an aside, the Rendell and Mann book is serving as our textbook because it's a good manual on how to lead a congregation through a strategic planning process. And even though you're only assigned to read it for this first week, it will serve as the basis of the whole course and will be referred to again. So here in week one, we are going to look at the getting ready phase, but also at one of those continuous tasks that Rendell and Mann talk about, those things that leaders should make sure to do all the way along in a planning process. That's the left-hand side and the right-hand side of their map. On the left-hand side is giving feedback to the board and congregation, but on the right-hand side is what they call studying Bible and text. This second continuous task could also be called connecting the present to the past, because studying Bible and text, what you're really doing is learning how to identify and tell your congregation's story. And so all the way along, a congregation doing strategic planning should learn to do that planning in the context of recovering their histories, their traditions, and their practices, and learning to interpret those for the future. Why this is so important to a strategic planning process, and what is even meant by histories, traditions, and practices, is the focus for this week.